Good morning, HSM. I'm so glad you've joined us today. If you don't know, my name's Ryan, and again, welcome to my garage slash basement slash third bedroom guest room. Anyways, I'm so glad that you've joined us today, and I just hope you're having a great week. You're so close to the end of school. Can you believe it? You're so close. Just a few more weeks left of school, and I am very excited for you to have a nice, long-ish 2 months summer break. But there's some exciting stuff coming up this summer at HSM. Now, last week I announced that we have summer camp, and we are continuing that announcement for you today. Summer camp, HSM style. Sign up today. Link in the description. You can sign up right there. It is. There it is. You can sign up now. You can sign up, and I hope you can come. We do have. We're almost half full already. So within the first week, people have been filling up and signing it up. So you should join us. Sign up today. As you can see, you sign up at cbc.org/events, or you can just go to the link down in the description that I have put in there. That is summer camp. We're going to Rock and Water. It's going to be it's going to be a great time. I'm very excited for it. I'm excited to see some people that have signed up that I haven't even seen in a few months even, and even some of our new freshmen coming up are joining as well. So obviously, if you right now are in 8th grade or you're a senior, you can come. That means if you are a senior this year and you graduate, you are still welcome to join us, obviously, to join us for camp, because last year you didn't get a camp, and so we want you to be able to be a part of it, be able to join us and have one last summer camp of high school before you head off to the big world of college. And I'm excited to hear about you seniors who have started picking your colleges. Oh, it's crazy. I feel like, especially a lot of you, I've known you for, well, a long time, since I've been at the church a long time, and it's cool to see all of you going off to college. Heck, when I first got here, my 7th grade class that I had, so I came in like halfway through the year, but the group of 7th graders that were my life group then are now graduating college now, and it's blowing my mind a little bit. It's crazy. But anyways, join us for camp. That was a roundabout way of saying join us for camp, and also join us for life groups. Again, link down in the description if you want to join us for life groups Thursday nights in person. It's been really cool to see all of you that have come, and you're more than welcome to join us. Even though we only have like a month and a half left, we're going to be diving into our series during the week, and as well as just kind of getting to hang out. I feel like we've really done more hanging out than like diving deep, because we just missed that aspect of it so much. We can talk about so much stuff online, but in person there's just something different about actually being able to talk and just hang out and play mini basketball. So I hope you can join us Thursday night, 7 o'clock for life groups. You do need to sign up for that, so sign up down in the description. It's free. You don't need to pay anything. Life groups did have a cost, but that was, now there's only a month and a half left. Just join us if you can. I really would love for you to join us if possible. And you know what? That's all I got for announcements. Those are 2 big announcements. They're the same as last week, but they are 2 big announcements. And yeah, that's what we got. And I'm excited for what we have coming up today. We're going to close off our Easter series, and Bryson is going to teach today, which is very exciting. I love, and newly married Bryson as well. Don't forget that he just got married a couple weeks ago, so he's fresh off the newlywed feel. So I'm excited that he's back, but also he's teaching again for us. And we only have like 2 months left with Bryson, because he's finishing up his residency. But I am excited for what he's got next. We'll have to maybe do an interview with him at some point to talk about what he has going on next up. So that's it from here. I'll see you after. We'll do a little bit of worship, and then we'll have Bryson. So let me pray for us, and then we'll head off into some worship. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for who you are, and I pray that we can just have a time of worship and reflection on you and praising your name. And it's in your Son's name that we lift this up. Amen.
Compassion, love that's never failing. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Take me as you find me, all my fears and failures. Fill my life again. I give my life to follow everything I believe in. Now I surrender. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Shine your light and let the whole world see. Singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see. Singing for the glory of the risen King. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Shine your light and let the whole world see. Singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see. Singing for the glory of the risen King.
Well, hey, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in today for another episode of HSM. My name is Bryson, for you guys who do not know, and I'm super excited to be here. I've been gone for roughly about a month, and for good reason. And the reason why was because I got married. And it was fantastic. Got married on March 21st, and afterwards we went to Tulum, Mexico for our honeymoon. And that also was adventurous. It was fun. It was exciting. And we are now back doing life together. But before we came back, there was this little instance I want to share with you guys that'll kind of transition to our message today. So if you guys know me, when I come on here and speak, I have kind of a love-hate relationship with social media. And since I think this was a big event in life, I decided to hop on the gram and Facebook and kind of just update my life and post some pictures for family and friends to see. And as I was going through my timeline, there was this video that popped up, and it was talking about planes, and it was like the top 10 stalls. So basically these planes would take off, they would stall and crash. And that probably wasn't the best video for me to watch right before I was about to go to the airport. And lo and behold, 30 minutes later, I am like terrified. And so we are going to the plane. And not only that, but we were flying JetBlue. Now, I don't have anything against JetBlue, but when I hear JetBlue, because I don't really see commercials and stuff for it, I automatically assume that it's kind of like a janky plane, the planes that are really kind of smushed and doesn't have any technology or air or anything in it. But thank God that plane was actually pretty nice. And one thing that they did have was DirecTV, which was cool. And I was able to distract myself and not focus on the plane stalling, you know what I mean, as we're in the air. And one of the things I was watching was basketball. And congrats, Stanford won the women's national championship for college basketball. And I was just watching professional basketball. And, it reminded me of my days when I used to play. And it was pretty cool, but I think another love-hate relationship I have with basketball is that I was heavy back in the day because I was a football player, as you guys know. So all the jumping up and down, I would get stress fractures in my feet. And what sucked about stress fractures was that it would start as this little itty bitty pain. And then pretty soon it would just progress. And all of a sudden, I'm really, really hurting. And I would start taping my foot. And then I would start hobbling around. And then pretty soon kind of just limping because I couldn't walk. Like the pain was just so bad. And I always thought that, when you had a stress fracture, it was actually better than if you completely broke a bone. But it wasn't until my doctors had informed me that it's actually better to completely break a bone, to have brokenness, because when the bones come back to heal, it's actually stronger than it was before. I'm going to say that again. It's actually better for bones to completely break, because when they fuse back together, the bond is actually stronger than what it was before. And today we're in the last series. The last week of the series. And we're going to be talking about not only Jesus' resurrection, but how the implications of that was in Peter's life. And we're going to look at that principle about the broken bones and how that actually unfolded in Peter's life. We're going to look at 3 different themes towards the end of Jesus's ministry in this part of Peter's life. And the 3 themes are guilt, communion, and restoration, and how brokenness is a necessary ingredient. Brokenness is necessary for us to find wholeness and to be, and when we come out of it, we're actually stronger than we were before. When we talk about brokenness, I think in the West, we don't really want to talk about pain. And there's even companies, again, here I go with the social media kind of tangent, but there's companies that are in the business of distracting you from how you actually feel about things. But like many of you guys may know, there's certain things that we just can't control in life. And brokenness is one of those things because it comes in so many different forms, in so many different ways, and in different times of our life. And so I implore and I thank you guys, and I want you to come with me on this journey as we explore these three themes going through Peter's life. So now we got to put this in context. Now we know Peter. Peter grew up a fisherman, and the implications of that is that when a rabbi would not necessarily go out to a fisherman to ask him to be a disciple. Jewish boys had either two roads. They either went the educational route or they went the trade route. And so the fact that Jesus called Peter to be his disciple was a big deal. Again, because, that's not necessarily the crowd they would go to look for a rabbi to go and look to find a disciple. And they did life together. This isn't like, I know you guys are busy, rightly so, because I hear some of the activities you guys do, and it is a lot. But this wasn't like a weekend thing. This wasn't like a club. This wasn't like an add-on. But if a rabbi approached you and you were his disciple, you did life together. You ate. You went with him everywhere he taught. You would, sleep in the same area with each other. And I was trying to think of how you would relate this to today, but I think the only closest relationship that you could think of is marriage. I know probably none of you guys are married, but I can just speak from my own experience recently being married. And maybe Ryan and Amy, when you are married, you begin to do things together. You begin to do life together. You establish a rhythm together. And that's the kind of bond. That's the kind of intimacy that the disciples had with Jesus. They were doing life together. And we see Peter. Peter was this guy who was brave. He would defend Jesus. He would speak up for him. He even cut the dude's ear off in trying to defend Jesus. He would swear allegiance. He would tell Jesus, he said, hey, I'm never going to leave your side. I'm your home dog. I'm your homie. We're boys, right? And there's even this moment in the gospel where we see Peter is called the Rock. He's like, Jesus asked them, who do you say that I am? And Peter's like, you are the Christ. You are the Son of the living God. And Jesus says that, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. And I'm sure in that moment he was thinking that he was this or that. But it's funny because as we kind of get to the end chapters of John's account of the gospel of Jesus's life, we see Peter kind of turn not really into a rock. We see that after the Garden of Gethsemane, then they're following Jesus and seeing what's going to happen. They're actually from the back. They're watching from the back. They're timid, him and John. Peter was brave in defending Jesus's ministry and defending Jesus earlier. But now we see that he is shrinking in the face of danger. And as they enter into the temple courts, they pull Peter and they ask him, hey, aren't you one of his disciples? And he says, no, I'm not one of his disciples. I've never met the man. And that was actually one of the three times that Peter was going to deny Jesus. And it's funny because there's this instance in the Gospel of John tells us that he warms himself by the fire with the very people who would turn their back on Jesus. And I just want to ask a question. Have you ever been labeled something? Have you ever had expectations put on you? And not necessarily put on you by other people, but maybe expectations that you've put on yourself. You see, because Jesus knew what was in Peter's heart. And he even told him, he said, Peter, you will deny me 3 times. But Peter put his own expectations on himself that, Lord, I'm going to be with you till you die. Maybe, the expectations that you're supposed to be this perfect Christian. You're supposed to be the role model that everybody looks up to. Him and her. You're supposed to be that A student. You're supposed to be that star athlete making every single play. You're supposed to be that musician who never misses a note. You're supposed to be that speaker who never messes up. And if you're like me, I've had plenty of those moments where these expectations we put on ourselves, expectations that maybe God has spoken something to you. And maybe your parents have encouraged you, or maybe it was a pastor or somebody who told you, this is what you're going to be. This is what you're going to look up to be when you get older. And you have this vision, as Peter did when he knew that he was going to be the rock and that God was going to use him. But if you're like me, you mess up. When you're like me, and I've had plenty of moments like this, when the pressure's on, you collapse. And in that moment, we see Peter is filled. And this is the first part of the journey I want to talk about, is guilt. And guilt, and I want to spend some time talking about guilt. Guilt is not necessarily the feeling. Guilt is more speaking to the status of when a person crosses a boundary morally, ethically, or legally. Because it's possible to be guilty and not feel guilty. If you go on YouTube, there's people who get sentenced for really heinous crimes. They're guilty, but they're laughing. They don't necessarily feel guilty. Now, the problem with that is that if we don't face the guilt, if we don't deal with the guilt, then the dangerous part is that guilt turns into shame. And shame is that inward feeling when one feels that they are beyond repair. And what you do is you internalize your mistakes as something is wrong with me. And you start living with the mistakes of your past. You start living with the things that maybe you have done and maybe what others have done to you. And what's dangerous about shame is that shame leads us to do things that we might regret. Shame is what closes us from love from others and love from God. It's what led Judas to hang himself. It's what leads our friends to cutting themselves and to taking pills, overdosing, drinking themselves to death. And maybe it's not as extreme, but it comes out in subtle ways, like maybe pushing people away because you feel that deep down inside that you don't deserve love. Because if people really knew what was going on inside, if people really knew what your thoughts were and what was going on in your heart, they wouldn't show you love. So you live with this shame in your way of protecting yourself, in your way of dealing with life. You push people away so that they don't have to see the mistakes. Maybe you even self-sabotage. You know you have it in you, but there's something in you that says, I don't deserve that because X, Y, and Z. And so what you do is because if people really knew, they wouldn't be giving me this scholarship for school. They wouldn't give me this new job opportunity or that position in the club at school. And so you self-sabotage any opportunity for you to be better because you don't deserve it. That's the dangers of shame. And so we see this Peter as he's not living up to his own expectations. And imagine it, that bond that they had in turning your friend over to be killed and acting like you never knew him. I'm sure there is so much shame. There's so much shame and feeling and guilt in that. And so we see Peter later in chapter 21 and things go on. Jesus is crucified and he's buried. And it says in John 21, 1-4 that Peter goes back to fishing. And he goes back because he needs something to ease his conscience. Because it's hard enough just to sit with that. But we always got to distract ourselves. And what we typically do today to ease the conscience so that we don't have to deal with things, so that we don't have to focus on the shame, is we distract. And that's why screen time is sometimes 20 hours a week, because we spend that much time not dealing with the shame. But thankfully, 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 Jesus offers us a way out of guilt and shame. And that's not where the story ends. And so that leads us into the next transition part of this, which is communion. And so after a night of fishing, the disciples, they haven't caught anything. Peter's out on the boat, hasn't caught anything. They hear a voice on the shore. Friends, do you have any fish? And they said, no, we ain't got no fish. We ain't got no fish. We were out here all night. We ain't got no fish. So he tells them, throw your net on the side of the boat. So they throw it over the boat, and lo and behold, they can't even bring it in. And John kind of looks over to the shore and peers over, and he's like, it's the Lord. And Peter automatically is the first one in the water. And he swims to the shore. They bring the fish. They bring the boat to the shore. And Jesus is sitting there with a fire ready, and with bread and with fish. You know, it's interesting. There's a survey, and I got this from this book, which kind of helped me pave this message today, Courage to be Healed. And it says Americans were asked what they most long to hear someone say to them. And there was 3 things. The first one, you can probably guess it, is I love you. The second one is I forgive you. And the third is supper is ready. And that, my friends, is a culmination of what the gospel is. I'm sure Peter knew when he got to the shore, he was going to hear it. He knew what he deserved, right? He was looking at the eyes of the one that he betrayed. And he knew everything that he deserved. But that's not what he got. It said Jesus fed him. And that, my friends, is the whole gospel on display. Is that Jesus calls us into communion with him, despite the shame, despite the guilt, despite everything. Peter was maybe expecting a rebuke, maybe public humiliation, you know, putting all your dirty stuff on the timeline. Or maybe he thought that Jesus was going to ask him to do something to make it up. You got to make it up to me. You have to do X, Y, and Z. But instead, Jesus fed him. Jesus fed him. God dining with sinners. So I want to encourage you, because maybe today you think that you are beyond God's forgiveness. Maybe you've seen moral failure. You've seen, not living up to your own expectations, or maybe the expectations your parents have, and you've given up. But Jesus is instead calling you to the table. And that leads us into this last portion, which is restoration. Restoration. And there's this scene that we see towards the end of John's gospel where Peter and Jesus are walking. Now, I imagine, and maybe I think this is just my creative imagination, but it's kind of like, you be in class and your teacher, you're supposed to talk to your teacher afterwards, but they didn't say anything in the beginning of class. So you're kind of worrying. You and the teacher are making eye contact, but nothing happens. And you're like, oh, okay, maybe we don't have to talk or whatever. And the bell rings and you're about to walk out of the door. And they're just like, hey, I need to talk to you. And it's like, oh, here we go. I'm about to hear it, And so I imagine that's probably what happened. I don't know if it happened or not. Don't listen to me. Anyways, but I imagine Jesus and Peter, and they're walking. And so, the famous passage where Jesus asks him, hey, do you love me? Peter says, yes, Lord, I love you. And he says, feed my sheep, feed my lambs, feed my sheep. And then he says this interesting passage. So he affirms him because Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Now he's saying that he loves him 3 times. And then Jesus says, very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you don't want to go. And then he says these 2 words, follow me. You see, because before, when Peter was at that fire, he gave up his cross. He gave up what God had called him to do for comfort. And now he assures him that when he follows him again, and how I kind of take that follow me is get back on the horse. I tell people all the time, get back on the horse. Continue to follow Jesus because his grace is enough. His grace is sufficient for all of your inadequacies, all of your failures. His grace is sufficient. Peter, and we see this Peter now, after being reinstated, goes on from public moral failure to apostolic leadership and true insightful eloquence. And as he roared like a lion in Acts chapter 2, and 30,000 people get saved. Peter was a guy who ended up writing part of the New Testament, who preached and who glorified God in his death. He was, I would say, stronger and different than what he was before. And to wrap up this message and to conclude it, I just want you to think about one thing. What was the difference between Judas and Peter? What was the difference between Judas and Peter? Because Judas denied Jesus for money, and Peter denied Jesus out of cowardice. Judas denied him once, and Peter denied him 3 times. Both of them were sorry. Both of them, and Judas wanted his money back, and Peter wept. But in the end, there were 2 different outcomes. One found himself in the upper room. One was hanging on a rope. What was the difference? How did Apostle Peter become such a role model in the church, in the early church, with apostolic authority, with him teaching and leading and doing the miraculous things that he did? What was the difference between the 2? It was because how they viewed their brokenness and who they brought that brokenness to. It's a beautiful thing. Sin, death, brokenness, it's a real thing in this world. And I don't want to mitigate it one bit. But I want to leave you with this. And I got this from Tim Keller. He says that if you were at the crucifixion, if you hung around Jesus and you were one of his disciples and you looked at what they were doing to him, you would have said, my God, this is the worst thing that could happen. There's nothing good that could come out of this. But in the grand scope of things, that was the greatest thing that God could have done in the world. And so what I want you to know is that your brokenness has the potential, when it is in the hands of God, when you have a living relationship with God, for it to turn into something beautiful. And so covering these 3 different elements of Peter's guilt, there's a place for that guilt to go, and that is to take it and have communion with God, which leads to restoration. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the gift of your Son. Thank you that our brokenness can turn into something beautiful. And I pray, Lord, for those who maybe are dealing with guilt, who are dealing with shame, that they would know that they have a Father who cares for them. And God, that you are faithful to your promises and that you are working things for good. So I pray that you would give them insight into what you're doing. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you so much, Bryson. Yes, and I love the story of Peter. Peter is a great person to look at in the Bible. Someone who was like rock solid with Jesus and then totally messed up, and then Jesus gave him the opportunity to be forgiven, just like we are all forgiven for what we do. I mean, Peter straight up denied Jesus to people right outside, right after Jesus got arrested, even though people knew he followed him. But Jesus came back and he got to spend time with him, and Jesus forgave him. Just like, again, he forgives us. This has been a great series. I'm really looking forward to discussing it Thursday. This Thursday at Life Groups. Again, link in the description to sign up for that if you haven't come yet. I'm also looking forward to next week. We're going to start a new series called Habits. And we're going to kind of learn about how we can improve on maybe some of our faith habits and some of the habits that we have in life as well. So looking forward to that new series. And don't forget, here we go. Boom, 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 boom. Summer camp, sign up today. I hope that you can join us for summer camp. That's all I got. Quick outro today. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week, and we will see you hopefully on Thursday. Bye.